My name is Jessica Hale. I'm 30 years old and I live in New York. I run a small tech company that builds AI solutions for security and healthcare. People love to imagine my life as champagne meetings and flashy headlines. It's not. It's long days, 10 hours sometimes, juggling engineers, investors, deadlines, and the kind of pressure that crawls into your bones. But at least this much is true. I built my life with my own hands, and I built it without my family. I don't talk about what happened before I turned 18, not because I'm hiding some terrible secret, but because most people hear your dad kicked you out, and the first thing they ask is, "What did you do?" As if a child must deserve being thrown away. The truth is, I didn't do anything wrong. It started when my grandfather died. 14 years ago, Grandpa Harold Hale passed peacefully in his sleep. Old age, quiet. The kind of death people call a blessing. But for me, it didn't feel blessed. It felt like the only warm light in our house had been turned off. Grandpa Harold was the only person in my family who treated my twin brother, Adrian, and me the same. No golden child, no scapegoat, no comparisons. Just love, steady and uncomplicated. A month after the funeral, everyone gathered at my grandfather's house for the reading of the will. The family lawyer arrived, a salt and pepper-haired man named Grant Whitman carrying a black leather briefcase like it held everyone's destiny inside. I sat beside my mother on the couch, hands clasped so tightly my knuckles looked bleached. My father stood near the window with his arms crossed, face blank. Grant read through the portions for my uncles and aunts first. Money, shares, properties, everything smooth, no fighting, no shouting. Then he reached the final portion, the inheritance for the grandchildren. My heart gave a strange little leap, hope, stupid and bright. I, Harold Hale, leave the amount of 200,000 US dollars to my two grandchildren, Jessica Hale and Adrian Hale. This money is to be used for college education or to start a business and will be held in trust under the names of their parents, David and Caroline Hale, until the children reach the age of 18. I still hear those words like an echo trapped in a hallway. At 16, I didn't think like an adult. I didn't understand greed the way I do now. I just thought, finally, something in my future was safe. I didn't even tell myself I'd rely on it. I kept studying like my life depended on it, because in our house, it always had. I competed in statewide academic contests. I lived in the library. I fell in love with information technology at 15, not because it sounded cool, but because it was the one place my mind felt powerful, like I could build a world that couldn't slam doors in my face. And I did it. Right after my 18th birthday, the acceptance letter came from the new Cambridge Institute of Technology, one of the top engineering schools in the country. Not only did I get in, I got a nearly full-ride scholarship for all 4 years. I walked into the kitchen that night like I was carrying proof I mattered. My mother was at the stove. My father had just come home from work. Adrian was in the living room, half watching something on TV, fingers tapping restlessly like he was always waiting for applause. I laid the letter on the counter. "I got the scholarship," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "New Cambridge, Information Technology." My father glanced down at the paper, but didn't pick it up. My mother offered a faint smile that didn't reach her eyes. No congratulations, no hug, just air. I swallowed anyway and kept going because I still believed logic could win in a family. "I want to withdraw the inheritance Grandpa left me," I said. "I'll use it for living expenses, a laptop, equipment for school." The kitchen went quiet in that heavy way silence gets when it's about to hurt you. Then my father spoke. "That's not going to happen, Jessica." I blinked. "What?" He didn't even hesitate. "Your mother and I already agreed that money is going to Adrian." For a second, I couldn't process it. Like my brain rejected the sentence on contact. Dad, Grandpa made it clear," I said, voice cracking despite my efforts. "It was for both of us. It's in the will." My father's eyes turned cold like a lock clicking shut. "You've got a scholarship," he said. "Adrian doesn't." I looked at my brother, waiting for him to say something. Anything. A protest. A flinch. A sign of guilt. Adrian didn't even look up from the TV. My father continued, as if he were explaining a simple math problem. "Adrian's pursuing the arts. That path is unstable. He needs every cent to chase it." I turned to my mother. She stirred the pot on the stove like she couldn't hear me bleeding right in front of her. "Mom," my voice went smaller. "Say something." She didn't. That was the first time I understood what it meant to be alone in a room full of people. I went back to my room that night, letter still sitting on the counter like a joke no one bothered to laugh at. I barely slept. My father's words replayed on loop. We already agreed. as if my future was something they'd negotiated over dinner. By morning, I knew talking to them again would be like knocking on a wall and expecting it to apologize. There was only one person left in my family I trusted, Uncle Caleb, my father's older brother. He wasn't loud, he wasn't dramatic, but when he looked at you, you felt seen. After breakfast, I rode my bike straight to his house. It was only 3 miles, but that morning it felt like crossing an ocean with weights tied to my ribs. Uncle Caleb was outside watering plants. He looked up surprised. "Jessica, what are you doing here so early?" I couldn't even pretend. I followed him inside, sat at his kitchen table, and poured out everything: the scholarship, the inheritance, my father's decision to give my share away like it wasn't mine. Uncle Caleb didn't interrupt. He didn't ask questions. He just listened, hands folded, eyes growing darker with every word. The clock on the wall ticked loudly enough to feel like judgment. When I finished, he exhaled once, slow, controlled. "You head home," he said. "I'll take care of this." Something in his voice made me believe him. Not hope, something steadier than hope, like a man who'd seen storms before and already knew where to stand. At 3 p.m., Uncle Caleb showed up at our house. The air changed the second he walked in, like my father could sense challenge the way some people smell smoke. Uncle Caleb didn't waste time. "I'm here to talk about the money Harold left for Jessica," he said calmly. "The will clearly states the inheritance belongs to both children." My father waved him off like he was swatting a fly. "The will doesn't say it has to be split evenly," he snapped. "It says it's for education. As their parents, we decide what's best." Uncle Caleb's gaze didn't move. "David, they're twins. Your father would never agree to you taking it from one child to give the other." My father's jaw tightened. "This is private. Stay out of my family." That word, family, hit like a slap. "What about me then?" I asked, voice shaking. "Am I not part of this family?" No one answered. So I asked the question that had been burning a hole through my chest. "If Adrian had the scholarship and I had nothing, would you take his share and give it to me?" Silence. My mother stared at the stove. Adrian stared at the TV. My father stared at me, like I was a problem he couldn't solve. "I'm not asking for extra," I said slowly. "I want what was left for me." My father's voice dropped, dangerous. "You got the scholarship. He didn't. He needs it more." I felt something inside me snap, not into rage, but into clarity. "I got the scholarship because I worked for it," I said. "Since when does hard work become the reason to have something stolen?" That's when my father slammed his hand on the table and stood up so fast the chair screeched. "Don't talk back," he barked. "Family means sacrifice." I swallowed, my throat tight. "I've sacrificed my whole childhood trying to be enough. At least let me keep what's mine." His face twisted, as if my words were an insult. "That's enough." And then he shouted the sentence that would follow me for the next 12 years. "Get out. I don't have a daughter like you." For a second, I couldn't breathe. Uncle Caleb stood immediately. "David, calm down. You can't—" My father pointed at the door. "You too. Get out. I don't need anyone teaching me how to be a father in my own house." Uncle Caleb stared at him for a long moment. No anger, just disappointment, heavy and final. Then he turned to me, voice soft. "Let's go, Jess. This place doesn't belong to you anymore." And with that, we walked out. I didn't look back. Because some part of me already knew, if I did, I might never leave at all. Uncle Caleb didn't drive fast. That's the strange detail my brain clung to as my whole world collapsed behind me. He kept both hands on the steering wheel, eyes forward, posture steady, like if he stayed calm enough, the universe would follow his lead. I sat in the passenger seat with my knees pulled close, staring out the window at the familiar street blurring past. The houses looked the same. The trees looked the same. Only I had changed. Only I had been erased. We didn't speak for the first 10 minutes. Not because there was nothing to say, but because any word would have cracked something open inside me that I couldn't afford to feel yet. My throat burned, like I'd swallowed glass. Finally, Uncle Caleb said quietly, "Stay in the car a minute." I blinked. "What?" He pulled up outside my father's house again. The same driveway, the same door, the same place that had just rejected me like I was a stranger. My stomach lurched. Uncle Caleb got out and walked back toward the door alone. And I sat there, obedient, frozen, humiliated by how quickly I'd learned I was no longer allowed to take up space in my own home. I watched through the windshield as he disappeared inside. Minutes passed. 10. 15. My heart pounded so hard it felt like it might bruise my ribs from the inside. My mind spiraled in circles. Is he begging them? Is he fighting? Are they laughing? Are they... Then the front door opened. Uncle Caleb came out carrying 2 backpacks, my backpacks. One large black one, one smaller gray one. He walked back to the car, opened the trunk, and placed them inside with the care of someone handling something fragile. He slid into the driver's seat, closed the door, started the engine. Then, without looking at me, he said, "For now, you'll stay at my place as long as you need." A sound caught in my throat, a mix between a sob and a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. "I didn't even get to say goodbye," I whispered. Uncle Caleb glanced at me then, just for a second, and what I saw in his eyes wasn't pity. It was something sharper. Protective. "They didn't give you that right," he said simply, "so don't torture yourself for not taking it." That night, I slept in a room that belonged to my cousin. Uncle Caleb's 2 kids, both still in high school, shared a room without complaint. No one asked intrusive questions. No one stared like I was a shameful secret. They just made space. Which sounds small until you've been raised somewhere that teaches you love is conditional, and space is something you earn. But even in that safe house, I couldn't sleep, because my father's voice kept rising in the dark, sharp and final. "I don't have a daughter like you." As if I wasn't flesh and blood. As if I'd been a mistake he could undo by slamming a door. I stayed with Uncle Caleb until it was time to move into campus dorms. And in those weeks, something strange happened. The anger didn't make me reckless. It made me disciplined. I didn't bring up the inheritance again. Not once. Not because I stopped wanting it, but because I understood something too well now. If they could steal what was legally mine and call it family, then the word didn't mean what I thought it meant. So I stopped chasing it. I took my scholarship and treated it like a lifeline I'd earned with my own hands. When I moved into the dorms at New Cambridge, I worked like someone who didn't have a safety net, because I didn't. Library shifts, lab assistant work, grading for a professor who barely remembered my name. I learned to eat cheap, sleep light, and always keep one eye on the future. My classmates complained about stress, while their parents Venmo'd them grocery money. I learned to survive on pride and instant noodles. 4 years later, I graduated with honors. At the ceremony, the auditorium was packed with families clutching flowers, balloons, and cameras. Parents cried like their child's success was proof their love had been worth it. I scanned the crowd anyway, not because I expected my parents to come, but because some stupid, stubborn part of me still wanted to see my mother's face soften for once. They weren't there. No call, no message, nothing. But Uncle Caleb was there. He stood near the back in a crisp shirt, his arms crossed the way he always did, like he was holding the room steady. My cousins were beside him, holding up a handmade sign that read, "Way to go, Jessica!" It looked childish, loud, a little ridiculous. And it nearly broke me, because it meant someone in the world was proud of me out loud. After graduation, I landed a job at a mid-sized software company focused on data security solutions. Starting salary, $63,000. In New York, that number isn't glamorous. It barely breathes. But to me, it was proof. I rented a small apartment in the suburbs, took the bus to work, cooked my meals, said yes to every difficult assignment because I didn't have the luxury of being above anything. I learned how to write system documentation no one wanted to touch. I learned how to debug code that made other engineers groan. I learned how to present to technical boards without shaking. Year 2, I got a raise to $78,000. Year 3, $92,000. And at night, when other people went out for drinks or slept, I freelanced. APIs, internal systems, quick fixes for startups who couldn't afford big firms. Just me, a tired laptop, and a hunger that never turned off. There were no mentors, no handouts, no industry connections, no father who could call a friend and get me in somewhere. I built my career the way I built my life, alone. The only constant was Uncle Caleb. I'd visit him on weekends, but it wasn't some emotional therapy session. Sometimes we'd eat dinner and watch old sports reruns. Sometimes we'd clean his garage in silence. He never asked what I made, never pushed me, never bragged about me like I was a trophy. He'd just walk me to the door and say the same thing every time. "Keep your head steady, Jess." That was it. And somehow it was everything. Then, 4 years ago, my life shifted again. It started with a small freelance project I picked up after work. I was paired with a senior engineer named Marissa Caldwell. Marissa was nearly 20 years older than me, sharp-eyed, blunt, and terrifyingly calm. She was the lead tech officer for a newly formed startup, and she had the kind of confidence that made rooms quiet. At first, I treated it like any gig. Do the work, get paid, move on. But after a few sessions, Marissa watched the way I handled system architecture and communicated with the client's dev team. One night, after we finally untangled a nightmare bug that had kept us up until 2 a.m, she leaned back in her chair and said, "You shouldn't be freelancing forever." I laughed, exhausted. "Tell that to my rent." Marissa didn't smile. You've got something most young founders don't, she said. Discipline and the ability to see the whole picture. I shrugged it off because compliments always felt like traps. But 2 weeks later, she sent me a full proposal. Not a job offer, a partnership, a plan. Her message was short. Read it. If you're serious, let's build something real. I read it 3 times. My hands shook a little. Then I said yes. At first, it was just the two of us. Marissa handled product direction and partnerships. I handled everything technical. Our office was a bare room in the back of a laundromat. No joke. The AC rattled, the desks were hand-me-downs, and the whole place smelled faintly like detergent and exhaustion. But I'd never felt more alive. We stayed up until 2 or 3 a.m., building our first test version. I wrote code, tested it, deleted it, rewrote it. Marissa was on the phone nonstop, pitching to every small investor who would listen. Most didn't. They saw a nameless startup with no branding, no media team, no hype. But 1 month after we launched our prototype, we landed our first client, a small clinic in Queens. 3 months later, 4 more signed on. A year from day one, a venture capital firm offered seed funding. The day we signed the contract, I didn't celebrate. I just quietly texted Uncle Caleb, "I'm moving offices soon." He replied, "Well done, proud of you." It wasn't poetic, but it hit me like warmth. We named the company Lumino, Latin for light, because Marissa and I both came from dark places, and we weren't interested in pretending otherwise. We didn't chase attention. We didn't waste money on flashy offices. We built something so good it could speak for itself. 2 years later, Lumino was ranked among the top healthcare support platforms by a leading tech magazine. Conferences, panels, invitations. The kind of rooms I used to only see on screens. 4 years after we started, Lumino was valued at nearly $30 million. I bought a small house in Brooklyn, a used but reliable SUV, a sense of stability I didn't know my body was still craving. And somewhere in the middle of that new life, I met Ethan Cross. Ethan wasn't part of the tech world. He didn't care about valuations, rankings, or headlines. He cared about whether I ate dinner, whether I slept, whether my shoulders stayed tense even when I said I was fine. He came into my life quietly, like Uncle Caleb did. And for the first time, I started to believe love could feel steady. But even with Ethan, there was a part of me I kept locked away. Family. The word made my throat tighten. Ethan noticed. One night, we were sitting on my couch, the city lights dripping through the windows. He reached for my hand and asked casually, "So, do you want to go see your parents for the holidays?" My fingers went cold in his grip. I forced a smile. "No, I don't do holidays like that." He studied me. "Why?" I didn't answer. Not because I didn't trust him, because I didn't trust myself. If I opened that door, I wasn't sure I could close it again. And the worst part? Ethan had a past too. A woman named Cara Vaughn, his ex-girlfriend. She wasn't dangerous in the obvious way, not with threats or screaming. She was dangerous the way certain people are, beautiful, charming, and always hungry for attention. Cara still hovered in the outer edges of Ethan's life like a shadow that refused to admit it was gone. She'd like his post too fast, comment with inside jokes, appear at the same events like it was coincidence. Ethan told me he was done with her, and I believed him. But Cara had a gift for one thing, turning people's lives into stories. And I didn't realize yet, my story was about to become the kind of story she couldn't resist touching. The email came on a Tuesday afternoon, buried between budget updates and engineering reports. Subject, founder. Feature, from nothing to Lumino. I stared at it longer than I should have. Over the years, I'd turned down interviews without hesitation. Not because I didn't want recognition, but because attention had a way of digging. And I'd buried my past carefully, brick by brick, silence by silence. But something in me had shifted. Maybe it was turning 30. Maybe it was Lumino finally standing on solid ground. Maybe I was just tired of pretending I didn't exist before success. So I replied. The interview itself was clean, professional, controlled. I talked about working 3 jobs, about living with my uncle, about learning early that no one was coming to save me. I didn't name my parents. I didn't name Adrian. I didn't even use the word disowned. I thought that would be enough. It wasn't. 2 days after the article went live, my name started trending in corners of the internet I'd never paid attention to. Old classmates, distant relatives, strangers speculating about my mysterious background. I muted notifications and went back to work. Then, on the 3rd afternoon, my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost ignored it. Almost. But something, instinct maybe, made my thumb move. Hello? There was silence on the line. Then a voice I hadn't heard in 12 years. Jessica, it's Mom. My body went completely still. Not tense, not shaking, just empty. I didn't say anything. She filled the silence quickly, like she was afraid I'd hang up. Are you doing okay? The question landed wrong, like a stranger asking for directions. I stayed quiet. She took a breath. I could hear it trembling through the phone. I know you're angry. I know we made mistakes, but things are bad right now. Your father, he's sick, bedridden. Adrian can barely make rent. Everything's falling apart. There it was, the ask without asking. I finally spoke, my voice calm enough to scare even me. I'm not angry anymore, Mom. She exhaled, hopeful, mistaken. But I also haven't been part of that family for a long time. Silence stretched. 12 years, I continued. Not one call, not one message. You didn't ask if I was alive, and now things are hard, so you're calling like none of it happened. Her voice cracked. We're family, Jessica. That word again. I felt it like a bruise someone kept pressing. I haven't had a family since the day you and Dad took my inheritance and kicked me out, I said evenly. You haven't forgotten that day, have you? She didn't answer. I hung up. I stood in the parking lot outside Lumino for a long time afterward, phone still in my hand, chest rising and falling, like I'd just run a mile. When I could finally breathe without shaking, I called Uncle Caleb. He picked up on the second ring. Everything okay, Jess? Mom just called, I said, for the first time in 12 years. He didn't interrupt. They're struggling. Dad's sick. Adrian's barely surviving. They asked for help. A pause. I said no. Uncle Caleb exhaled slowly. Then, in the same steady voice that had carried me through every collapse, you did the right thing. Tears burned my eyes, but I didn't let them fall. You're not being cruel, he continued. You're protecting yourself. What they're facing now is the result of choices they made a long time ago. You're not obligated to carry that weight. The words settled over me like armor. I thanked him, told him I'd come by for dinner that weekend, and hung up. I thought that was the end of it. I was wrong. A week later, I got a message from someone I barely spoke to anymore, an old industry contact. You should see this. There was a link. I clicked. It was a public post. From Adrian Hale, my twin brother. The first line hit like a punch. I'm Adrian Hale, twin brother of Jessica Hale, and this is the truth behind the image of an inspirational founder. He wrote about me leaving and never coming back, about our father's illness, our mother's exhaustion, about how he worked 2 jobs to keep things together while I lived comfortably. He wrote, my sister has more money than anyone in our family ever dreamed of, but instead of helping, she chose silence. The post exploded. Shares, comments, strangers praising his bravery, condemning my coldness, people who didn't know me, people who didn't know the truth, people who only knew a story. Within 48 hours, the headlines followed. Lumino founder, accused of abandoning family. During father's illness, from inspiration to controversy, what is Jessica Hale hiding? My inbox flooded. Reporters, investors, partners suddenly concerned. An agreement we'd just signed went under review. For the first time in years, Lumino, the thing I built from nothing, was under threat. And it wasn't from the market. It was from my blood. That afternoon, an internal meeting filled the main conference room. No one said much. They didn't need to. Every eye was on me, waiting. I stood at the front of the room, headlines projected behind me like accusations carved in stone. My life, twisted, edited, devoured. I didn't care about public opinion, but one wrong move could cost my team everything. Then my phone rang. Uncle Caleb. I stepped into the hallway and answered. I read the news, he said calmly. Are you all right? I didn't pretend. I don't know what to do, I admitted. If I speak, they'll say I'm deflecting. If I stay silent, they'll assume I'm guilty. He didn't hesitate. Listen carefully. Call your legal team. Call PR. Get them all to the office. Now. For what? I asked. To prepare a counterattack, he said. I'll be there in an hour. With evidence. My heart skipped. What evidence? You'll understand when I arrive. He hung up. I stood alone in the hallway, staring at the black screen of my phone. I didn't know what Uncle Caleb had planned, but I knew this much. For the first time since I was 18, I wasn't about to face my family alone. Exactly 1 hour later, Uncle Caleb walked into Lumino's lobby like he'd been summoned, not rushed. Same steady posture, same calm face. In his hand was a worn leather document case, old enough to have lived a life before this moment. The receptionist called upstairs, but this time I didn't send an assistant down. I went myself. When the elevator doors opened, he was already waiting. He gave me a small nod. No questions, no reassurance, just presence. I led him straight into the conference room where my legal counsel, PR lead, and executive team were seated in tense silence. Conversations died the moment he stepped inside. Uncle Caleb didn't waste a word. He placed the document case on the table and opened it. First, he slid out a familiar paper, clean, official, unmistakable. My grandfather's will. Not a summary, not a copy of a copy, the notarized original. He let it sit there, long enough for everyone to read the names. Jessica Hale, Adrian Hale, equal beneficiaries, held in trust, no ambiguity. Then he reached back into the case and pulled out the second document. This one was sealed in plastic, slightly yellowed at the edges. He placed it gently in the center of the table. The room went dead silent. Across the top, in bold lettering, were the words, "Acknowledgement of termination of parental rights and responsibilities." I couldn't breathe. My eyes skimmed the page, my hands trembling as the words rearranged my memory into something horrifyingly concrete. We, David Hale and Caroline Hale, voluntarily and knowingly declare that we no longer maintain any emotional, legal, or financial relationship with the individual known as Jessica Hale. Signed, dated, witnessed. 12 years ago, I felt like the ground dropped out from under me. One of Lumino's attorneys stood abruptly, voice sharp with clarity. "This is a legal disownment document," she said. "They severed all ties with Jessica by their own will. Now they're accusing her of abandonment. No court will uphold that." The tension in the room snapped, like a string pulled too tight finally breaking. I still didn't speak. I just stared at the paper, my mind screaming one question. "When did you do this?" Later, when the room cleared and the team split into action, drafting statements, issuing takedowns, preparing litigation, I finally asked him. We were sitting in a small cafe near the office, same one we'd visited dozens of times. Same black coffee for him, no sugar. "How did you get that?" I asked quietly. Uncle Caleb leaned back, eyes drifting to the street. "That day you were kicked out," he said. "After I told you to stay in the car, I went back inside." My chest tightened. "I asked them one last time," he continued. "Are you sure? He's 18. You want to cut her off like this?" I swallowed hard. "And?" "They didn't hesitate," he said. "So I told them, if you're truly done, write it down, sign it. Don't leave room to lie later." I stared at him, stunned. "I didn't force them," he added. "I just made sure they couldn't rewrite history when it suited them." I didn't know what to say. For 12 years, I thought I'd walked that road alone. I hadn't. The counterattack was swift. Lumino released a single, unemotional press statement. No drama, no commentary. Just 2 attachments. The will, the disownment document. Within 30 minutes, social media shifted. Within an hour, headlines changed. Within 2, journalists who'd rushed to condemn me were quietly requesting follow-up quotes. Adrian deleted his post without explanation. No apology, no correction. Silence. I thought that would be the end. It wasn't. 3 days later, during peak morning hours, security called my office. "They're here," the guard said. "Your parents and Adrian." I walked to the window overlooking the entrance. There they were, holding signs, crying, kneeling in front of the building like a public performance. Employees stared. Phones came out. They screamed apologies, said they needed 5 minutes, said they were family. I didn't go down. I called security, then the police. As they were escorted away, my phone buzzed. "Ethan, I'm with you," he said. "Whatever you decide." I closed my eyes. Outside, the doors shut behind the people who once called me their daughter. And for the first time, I didn't feel guilty. 3 months passed between the day my family was escorted away from Lumino's entrance and the day we walked into court. 3 months of waiting. I didn't give interviews. I didn't post statements. I didn't defend myself online. I let silence do what it had always done best, hold the line. The trial began on a gray Monday morning. I arrived early with Uncle Caleb. We sat side by side in the wooden pews outside the courtroom, the air smelling faintly of dust and old paper. He didn't speak much. Neither did I. When the doors opened, we walked in together. My parents were already seated on the opposite side. They didn't look at me. Neither did Adrian. And in that moment, something became painfully clear. Whatever bond people assume twins are born with had been severed long ago, not by distance, but by choice. The trial lasted 2 days. My legal team laid everything out with brutal clarity. The certified will, the signed disownment document, Adrian's original post, word for word, the financial and reputational damage to Lumino, lost deals, delayed partnerships, shaken investors. No dramatics, no character attacks, just facts. The defense tried to settle. An apology was offered through lawyers, carefully worded, bloodless. I declined. Not because I wanted revenge, but because I needed a line drawn so clearly that it could never be blurred again. After 48 hours of deliberation, the judge returned. The courtroom went quiet. Adrian was found guilty of public defamation and intentional reputational harm. He was ordered to pay $1.2 million in damages. My parents were found liable for assisting in the spread of false information. They were ordered to issue a public written apology on the same platforms where the accusations went viral. All three were legally barred from mentioning my name or my company's name in any public capacity. Any violation would result in criminal penalties. I didn't look at them when the verdict was read. I stood up, thanked my legal team, and walked out of the courtroom with Uncle Caleb. I didn't feel victorious. I felt finished. That night, Ethan and I sat quietly in my kitchen. No celebration, no champagne, just two people breathing in the same space. "You okay?" he asked. I nodded slowly. "I think this is the first time I've ever felt truly protected," I said. He didn't say anything. He just reached for my hand, and that was enough. In the weeks that followed, Lumino stabilized. Deals resumed. Investors returned. The storm moved on to find something else to consume. My parents never contacted me again. Adrian disappeared from my life completely. And I didn't chase closure, because I finally understood something I wish I'd learned sooner. Forgiveness doesn't mean access. Silence doesn't mean weakness. And family doesn't get unlimited chances just because you share blood. I'm sharing this story not to be admired or pitied, but for anyone who's quietly enduring harm under the name of love. You are allowed to walk away. You are allowed to protect what you built. And you are not wrong for refusing to be destroyed, no matter who's holding the match. So I'll ask you the same question I asked myself before I ever stepped into that courtroom. Was I wrong to take my own family to court to protect my name, my company, and the life I built with my own hands?